terms of performance and injury mitigation, how different would your process be in coaching when looking to maybe a late stage performance phase for an ACL athlete compared to an athlete looking to improve their power cutting ability?
There's a lot of evidence showing knee valgus to be a strong determinant of potentially hazardous knee joint loads, particularly these knee valgus moments. Trunk control is quite a topical issue at the moment. So from a pre-planned perspective, if we can shift our trunk towards the direction that we want to be changed direction, that's going to more optimally align our center of mass towards the intended direction of travel, but it's also going to reduce some of the knee valgus moments and the load into at the tissue. So if I'm performing a side step cut, if I'm moving my right foot laterally to push off towards the left, I want to try and potentially tilt my pelvis and orientate my trunk towards the left. So from a pre-planned perspective, great. However, one typical cue that we hear practitioners say all the time is drop the shoulder to try and evade the opponent. And that normally coincides with us dropping our trunk towards the stance leg. I think what we need to be aware of is if you're coaching your athletes that technique, just acknowledge there could be an increased risk of injury.
If you're getting into those shapes that aren't as efficient and that athlete's doing that over and over again, are they predisposing themselves to a higher risk compared to an athlete that is efficient, do you think?
So potentially an athlete is performed acutely, whether that's over the course of a match, repeated cycles of high intensity decels and change directions, potentially with suboptimal technique, or potentially over a chronic period of time. And then gradually that tissue is becoming weaker and weaker. And what was previously a submaximal load, now that's become a maximal load, which exceeds the tolerance capacity, like the brakes going in your car. Eventually the brakes wear out and they no longer function. But in our case, we get a catastrophic injury. This has been shown like more in lab-based studies with cadavers where they've repeatedly exposed the tissue to repeated cycles of like with combined internal rotation moments and arteriotibial shear, and then gradually you get weakening of the tissue from submaximal loads. The difficulty is monitoring tissue strength or ACL properties in vivo in live humans.
If we're going above and beyond, and let's say through screening and parents having ACL, high risk population, what would be the sort of non-negotiables to put in a best practice?
In terms of the screening, the movement quality as such. But I think understanding the family history, doing your typical musculoskeletal screening. So Gillian Weir developed a 2D screening tool where you'll be measuring certain joint kinematics and trunk positions and lower limb positions. But an issue with 2D analysis is obtaining quality footage in the frontal planes, trying to avoid parallax error. We've got markerless technology as well, systems such as like Thea, computer vision techniques as well. Again, the validity is still questionable, but I think as a minimum, we should be understanding how our athletes move, whether it's visually, coach's eye, or using video-based technology.
Do you film that phase and review the vision, or is it more of a gut feel that you start to see, ask the athletes, how are you feeling? Are you confident? What's some of your key metrics?
Ultimately, you probably will need a spectrum of tests, probably pre-planned and unplanned, or examining the game footage. So even during phases, as long as the kind of like key aspects of pain and obviously regaining range of motion, I would still like to introduce some elements of decel positions, cutting positions, turning positions, whether it's through isometric holds initially, and maybe low-level landing stabilization or banded exercises as well to get into the postures that we want. Low-level landing stabilization exercises to plyometrics, so that's a bit of a continuum. And then essentially deconstruct cutting, turning, and decel. So a lot of banded walk exercises, banded lateral exercise, getting into the postures. We use slingshot exercises, so pulling the athlete with a band, getting into the decel posture. So initially, I would want to be trying to master them, probably using coach's eye just to and listen for the sounds, because generally you will be hearing athletes slamming on the brakes, and even just asking them, how did that feel?
Opinion or belief that you hold that's against the mainstream challenges a popular consensus.
A really powerful book, podcast host now as well, is Cal Newport, and he's got a book called Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. And it's controversial, but he argues that following your passion isn't necessarily the best advice. And he argues, yes, you need to have some interest in it, but just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean you necessarily will be good at it and you should follow your career in it. For example, lots of people want to be personal trainers, yoga instructors, but what's going to help you stand out from the crowd, which is ultimately going to give you job and career satisfaction. So it was a very thought-provoking book, and he argues developing rare and invaluable skills should be the thing that will ultimately make you more in demand, give you more control, more job satisfaction.